This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show. Jeff and I are parents of two adult sons. Liam is 22 and Ethan is 19. They both live on their own, they're going to college, and they're in a different city from us. They moved out this past fall when we had to pivot and move back to Nova Scotia. It all happened kind of fast. We weren't exactly sure if we taught them everything that they needed, but we also knew that they were only a phone call or a text away. They've had a lot of questions, from headlights in the car burning out to dealing with landlords, and a lot of questions we could never have anticipated. I couldn't help but wonder if only there was some kind of manual that we could give them to learn shit before they had to know it. Problem solved. Joining me today is Natasha Sattler, who has written Shit Adults Never Taught Us. It's part memoir, part self-help, and it's all served up in bite-sized pieces to pick up where traditional education left off. Hi, Natasha.
Hi, that was such an introduction. Thank you.
Oh, well, that's why it was so easy to sort of flow into this, was because it's exactly what we've lived through since October.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we did have a manual? That's how this whole book came to be. Is I needed a manual in life, and then I started talking to my friends, and it became pretty obvious. So did all of them. And like you said, you did a fantastic job raising both of your sons, and you prepared them as much as humanly possible. But technology moves faster than parenting and school systems and standardized testing. So how are you supposed to teach them how to invest if it's constantly moving, or, change a light bulb when cars are changing every 5 seconds and all of that? So there's a lot that we didn't learn. And this book is broken up into 4 sections. The first section being career and money, and that encompasses everything from side hustles to knowing when to leave a job to negotiating salary and raises. Then there's the relationship section that goes from having the courage to fall in love to surviving a breakup and everything in between. And then mind is calming anxiety, trusting change, all that encompasses our mental health. And then life is all the miscellaneous, like what you just talked about, which goes from everything from traveling to protecting your privacy online to knowing what to settle for and what not to settle for in life. And then, of course, asking questions.
And I mean, let's face it, we're probably 2 generations apart here, or 1 generation apart.
I'm 31. I'm 31,
okay.
But I feel like I encompass a lot of generations.
I'm 48, so there's a bit of a gap. But it's not like I learned any of this stuff in school either.
I don't think anybody did.
No.
I don't think we really learned the real nitty-gritty of relationships. We learned what Disney had to teach us, and we learned, which was the least accurate version of relationship.
Well, especially seeing that it always ends in happily ever after.
But they
never tell you what happens after the wedding.
every single Disney movie ends on the first date. The first date happens to be a wedding a lot. I don't know why, but every single Disney movie ends on the first date, and you're like, "Cool," but, like, what happens when Cinderella doesn't feel like cleaning the house? Or, like,
Or
what
who
hap
said that Cinderella has to clean the house? Why can't Prince Charming do
right?
it?
What happens when Prince Charming leaves his dishes all over the house? Like, we leave off a lot of Disney fairy tales on the first date, and we leave off our relationship education somewhere around, like, 16, because all of our friends are talking about relationships and what they think they know, and then at some point, it becomes sort of introverted. We take a lot on for ourselves because if our friends aren't talking about it, we think we're weird. So if our friends have this amazing relationship that they're obviously just putting a front on for at 15, 16, and ours feels different than that, then we feel like we've done something wrong. And first of all, no relationships at 16 are perfect.
No
They can't
relationship ever is perfect.
No relationship ever is perfect, but the relationship that your friend is having at 16, 17, 18, and they're like, "Oh my god, I met the most amazing guy and he treats me so amazingly," isn't perfect. It's just we think it's supposed to be and nobody tells us otherwise. Nobody tells us how to manage heartbreak. Nobody tells us how to get comfortable in a relationship and know that you get to be yourself and show up authentically, and that's how you find the real connection. There's so much we aren't taught when it comes to relationships, and we sort of stop asking questions after a while and just sort of internalize a lot, and we struggle our way through. And that can be really damaging because we think there's something wrong and we don't really know how to navigate it. But we were never taught.
No, no, we weren't. And, I think that's such a big problem. Now, I did meet my now husband I met him when I was 18.
Wow.
He's 5 years older. That's what happens when you go drinking in bars underage. But yeah, I moved out with him when I was 19.
And do
And
you have the perfect relationship? You never fight and everything is rainbows and
oh, no,
unicorns?
I mean, it's like everything. It goes through your relationship goes through that same roller coaster that life does.
Yes.
Because, when I moved down at 19, I had no clue. I'd gone from living with my parents to living with my boyfriend, and he'd been living on his own since he was 18, so he'd been out for 4 or 5 years. And it was trial by fire. I didn't know even about, like, paying bills. I didn't know how to budget, meal plan, any of those really sort of basic things. You just kinda figured it out as you went along, and
Yeah.
having those answers, it probably would have been a lot easier.
Well, in the relationship section, I constantly say is so not about the relationship that you're in. It's more about the relationship to yourself to inform the relationship that you're in. And falling in love is not about the other person. Falling in love is about you and the courage and the empathy that you have to fall in love. Learning how to fight is not about the other person. It's learning how you feel productive and how you're able to approach problem solving. And everything in between that encompasses a relationship. Relationships aren't about the other person. They're about you and how you respond to things and what you need, what you're looking for, what you feel satisfied in, what your love languages are. All of that is a relationship. And if you're not showing up to it as you, then the relationship it doesn't have legs. It can't be sustainable because your component is just as valid as the other person's.
Okay, that would have been really helpful to know about 20 years ago. It was like, even sitting here now, it's like you just taught me something, because I'd never thought of it that way. That for me, it wasn't until I went through my own shit and basically kind of hit rock bottom about 4 years ago that I took the time to learn who I was, that I figured out who that authentic self was. And it was then that I was able to better communicate and have a better relationship with my husband.
And it's interesting because a lot of people think that fighting is like you versus them, right? Like you're like,
But it is.
my husband and I are fighting. No, it's you and your husband versus the problem. So
Yeah, but if you're communicating properly, then you're
Mhm.
not fighting. You're solving the problem.
Well, I would say that a lot of fights that we have are the wrong fights. So I have a chapter in the book called What's Below That. And this conversation came about from a friend of mine who said during quarantine, her and her newly live in boyfriend, were fighting all the time. And they were fighting about him leaving his socks everywhere and him sitting on the couch and not helping out around the house and him leaving dishes without putting them in the dishwasher and him leaving the bathroom a mess. And she was like, we were constantly having the same fight, but in different ways. And I was like, it's because you're not having the right fight. What's below? You're not helping out with the house, you're not doing the dishes. What's below that might be, and I was like, it's in you. You know what the fight is. So what's in that is it I feel like I care about this relationship more than you. I feel like my needs are not being met. I feel like we are on different pages as to how we show love. That's the fight. And once you have that fight, then you get to move past it. And so in that chapter, I break down the how to peel back the onion, how to get to that layer. Because if you're communicating, like you said, if you're communicating on a deeper level, then the little fights go away because you had the real fight. You got to the meat of it. And once you've had that, it's been productive and you've stated what you actually need and what you're actually looking for. Then you get to what's below it.
And I think what's key in what you just said was understanding what you need. And
Yes.
that's a different process all in itself. That's outside of your relationship with your partner. That's that relationship with yourself. And again, it's not a concept that we're ever encouraged to explore within what we'll call traditional education.
No, we're taught not to fight. I would like fight with my brother, and my parents would be like, stop fighting. But nobody said, keep fighting, but here's how to make it productive.
Or it's like helping the other person. It's something that I do with our kids. I call them kids because they're still my kids. Um,
Always.
is it when they come to me and when they're because they've actually for the past since October, they've been roommates. They've had other roommates, but they've all been in the house together. So, the dynamics have shifted because now they're both adults living on their own, but they're still together in house. So anytime they would come with, call it a complaint about the other one, I would hear them out and I would say, okay, but remember where the other person is coming from. This is
Yes.
who they are. This is how they communicate. You know, see their side of the story. I'm not saying who's right. I'm not saying who's wrong, but this is your chance to learn how to communicate better and also to understand who you are.
Absolutely. And fighting doesn't just happen in romantic relationships, it happens in friendships and coworkers and family and every kind of relationship. And I always say, like, when you're fighting, the easier way to navigate those fights is to go back to like the middle school way of thinking, the who, what, where, when, why of who am I actually mad at? Am I really mad at this person or am I mad at the guy who cut me off in traffic earlier, but I can't yell at him, so I've got to yell here? When does this always happen? Does it happen like I feel like I'm constantly fighting with my partner, with my brother, with my friend at 11 p.m. because I'm tired, or at 7 p.m. because I'm hungry, or like digging into those who, what, where, when, why, and I break those down in the book a little bit more is gonna inform a pattern. And when you can get to the pattern again, that just informs you and it's showing a different side of the fight. You always see your side of the fight from I'm mad and here's why. But maybe the other side of it is what's internal for you. What about this fight is informing you as a person?
Yeah.
And where's the growth in that? Just like the mental health sections, it's all based in personal growth. So if you're anxious, it's getting to the components. It's not necessarily calming anxiety in a quick fix way. It's getting to the components of what causes the anxiety that actually calms it.
So if you're dealing with anxiety and say you always have, your anxiety always say flares up when you start stressing about money.
Mhm.
What do you do from there? Like once you identify, okay, well, I know when I start stressing about money, my anxiety flares up. So what do you do
I
with
would
it from
say
there?
what it probably is you figure out where the anxiety is in your body.
Okay.
So when you start thinking about money, where do you feel it? Do you get a pit in your stomach? Do you get hot? Do you feel a tightness in your chest? Does your head start to hurt? Where is that? And then you can work on the coping mechanisms of, okay, what is it? Is it my gut reaction is telling me that there's something wrong? I'm nervous, I'm uneasy, or am I getting a headache because I'm overwhelmed? Am I feeling it's too much? Am I feeling tightness in my chest because I'm scared or it's fear based? And once you know where it is in your body and the emotional connection to it, then you can fix it, right? Because if it's fear, then it's planning. If it's nerves, then it's calming down what's causing those nerves. Am I nervous about it because I feel like I'm not going to be able to pay my rent, or am I nervous about it because I feel like my partner is spending too much money? Once you find the emotional component, then you address the emotion of it. And then you go to the coping mechanisms. But I also say in the book, like, nothing works 100% of the time, and not everything works for one person. So I write like half a dozen coping mechanisms that I use, and I say, this coping mechanism works really well if I'm about to go into a scary meeting or job interview or a scary podcast or whatever it may be. And this coping mechanism works really well when I'm about to have a tough conversation. This coping mechanism works really well. And really, what it is I have figured out the different aspects of where it is in my body informs what emotion it is for me. And when I figure out what emotion it is, then I figure out what coping mechanism works for that emotion.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Now, like another big section that should be covered in school, but it's kind of, if it's covered at all, it's glossed over.
Uh-huh.
And that's your career and your money section. I mean, they spend so much time in school teaching us algebra and calculus, and which is
Yeah, I'm
which
still
is
waiting to use
great.
those. I'm
It's
still
great.
waiting on my calculus need.
I didn't take calculus. I didn't. I
I
was
took
good.
pre-calculus.
No, no. My son, my oldest son, his girlfriend is doing a Bachelor of Science. She's going to be a nurse, and she's done calculus and all sorts of crazy ass shit. And it just, yeah, no, not my thing.
No, no,
Um,
no.
but
I want to preface this that I was a terrible student. Like, I was the BC student, and so I I'm not coming at any of this from an algebra calculus standpoint. I'm coming at it from a practical
practical.
standpoint because I hated school. So I wrote a book for other kids who don't like school and don't like learning. Like, if somebody had given me a book where every chapter was 2 or 3 pages and all of them were funny and all of them were written from one person's mistakes, which is what this book is, then I probably would have learned it. But if somebody sat me down and taught me about negotiating a salary or a raise, I probably would have tuned them out and I wouldn't have
Yeah.
listened. So that's why I wrote it for the person that has trouble with calculus and algebra and paying attention to the boring stuff, because I was that person, am that person.
Yeah. Oh no, agreed. And even with whatever math programs they teach at school, they don't really go past any sort of, I seem to recall some vague financial component in math class, but nothing to the extent that you would need when it comes to, like you said, about, buying a car, getting a loan, credit cards, you
I
know?
know. Credit cards was a big one. And like And buying a car, like I put a couple of tricks in there too, because I feel like buying a car, they do this smoke and mirrors thing where they're like, we want no one to ever figure out this process. But
Oh, I know, I'm vicious. Well, first of all, we determined fairly early on in our relationship that my husband should not be negotiating to buy cars because I would be like, I don't want to pay that much. I don't want to pay that. And he would be like, oh, no, no, no. But that's a charge that everybody has to pay. And I'd be like, would you stop it? I'm trying to get a deal here.
exactly. And like ask for an itemized thing. It's the same with health insurance. And I think you guys have it slightly different. But in America, like we have to fight with health insurance all the time. And sometimes you just ask for an itemized bill and then you figure out that they charge $75 for gloves. And you're like, well, that's why they didn't want to show it to you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
latex gloves are like $1. So
Yeah. You're like, can I
car,
bring my own kit when I go to the doctor's?
right? It's like same thing with a car. Ask for an itemized list, and suddenly all of
Yeah.
these fees go away because they don't want you to know. But I feel like the same way in school, and that's why I got the career and money section out of the way first, and I write in the beginning of the book that if you've got that down, skip it. I'm not your mom. Like I'm not going to check up on you and make sure that you read the career and money section and that you've got everything set. Skip around the book, figure out the sections that matter to you today, put it on a shelf, come back to it in a month, 2 months, 6 months, whenever you have another situation arise. It's a manual to life. It's not a cover to cover novel. So figure out what you need right now. Like, for example, in school, I felt like we did a resume class. I did a refresher here that says, here's what your resume should be. Here's an example of a resume. Here's what you should include. But also, times have changed.
I was going to
So
say, yeah, they've even the format in how you do a resume, 10 years ago to what they expect now.
exactly. Like the software didn't matter a few years ago. It does now. But
Yeah.
the mission statement did matter. It doesn't now. And your mission is to get a job. People used to stay in positions 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We are now in a very different culture where it is very normal to switch jobs every 3 to 5 years. And your resume should reflect more of what you can do and less of what you want to do. And that is the gig and startup culture that we live in now. It's also technology is moving so fast. Reflect that you're adaptable. That is more of the mentality. But also in school, I was taught how to get a job, how to get a job, how to get a job. Nobody taught me when to leave a job. Nobody taught me these are the couple of signs on when it's gotten stale and when it's got static. Nobody also taught me when to leave a relationship. And I stayed in one for 9 years that probably should have been more of a 4 or 5 year relationship. I think we are taught get what you want, and we're never taught how to navigate if what we get isn't what we want. So side hustles were not a thing, I don't think.
Oh
20
God, no. Oh God, no, no. I mean, it was always, I was raised by post World War II
So was I.
parents
And
in England. Like,
I was raised by people who got raises and got matching 401k retirement funds and got relocation packages if their company was somewhere that they were not. And those things are not realistic anymore. And retirement is more of a dream in some cases than a given. And what we are taught is from people teaching from what they know and their own
mm,
experiences. But unfortunately, the world has changed so much so the people above us teaching us are only able to teach to a certain point. And I talk about like investing. I thought when I was a kid, investing had to happen if you were a dude wearing a suit and you had like a really fancy job and drove a BMW. And it's not. Investing can happen on an app on your phone with $20 and it's just sort of like socially acceptable gambling. And I had no idea. And then Bitcoin became a thing. And
yeah.
if somebody had taught me the very basics of investing, I wouldn't have sat mystified by what Bitcoin is for years.
I- If I had a little bit more courage, then I wouldn't be worrying about having a job because Bitcoin would have paid off. I mean, it's tanked now, but yeah, it's
But
things
so
like
does the
that.
market. The
Oh
market
God,
changes.
yeah.
And
And that's
understanding that is part, like you talked about anxiety. understanding the components of things like investing, like salary negotiations and raise negotiations. I was under the impression when I was a kid that you got a job and then every year they just were like, thanks for staying. Here's a bucket of money. And that never happens. I was so confused when my bucket of money didn't arrive after my first year at a job. And my dad was like, oh, you have to ask for it. And I went to my boss and I was like, okay, so I've been here a year. Can I get a raise? And he was like, why do you think you need a raise? And I was like, because I've been here a year. And that's not how a raise conversation
No.
happens. So I broke down, how have you benefited the company? What value have you added? Have you taken over another role? Have you added responsibilities? Have you saved the company money? Have you brought in clients? I break down all of that and then I tell you how to present it where your value is so clear that they can't not give you more money. But nobody just gives you a pile of money. And that wasn't told to me because I do believe that it was far easier to ask for a raise in an economy that didn't, or in a generation that didn't have a recession and a pandemic in 10-ish years. I graduated college in 2010 at the end of the recession and finally, got my career off the ground, which unfortunately started sort of in the basement instead of the lobby, and built my way up. And then just as I'm getting to a point where it's like, great, you've got it all figured out, pandemic hits. And they're like, just kidding. Never
Oh,
mind.
yeah.
The universe was like, that's adorable that you think you have it.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
no.
Yeah. Good. That's nice. Good for you. Good for you.
And that
Yeah.
brought up so many other questions like side hustles, like figuring out savings and planning for the future that I was like, I guess I didn't have it together. So let's start over. And when I started figuring out that everybody else didn't have it together around me, it became glaringly obvious we're all just pretending and figuring it out as we go, which seems like the hard way to do it. I don't want the generation after me to have to go through all the same struggles with the assumption that things will just go smoothly once they figure it out. First of all, you never figure it out. You're always a work in progress. But along the way, if somebody had just said, well, why are you doing it the hard way? Here's the easy way. It would have saved me a lot of time and it would have been so valuable. I could have saved myself a lot of heartbreak. I could have saved myself a lot of struggle that was unnecessary.
Oh, for sure. And, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking that, if you just put a new cover on the book, leave it exactly how it is, but name a second version, shit adults need to know, because there are plenty of adults out there that we need these resources too. I mean, I've never been taught how to negotiate for my salary. I've never been taught, some of these basic things that we've been talking. I mean, as I pointed out earlier, you created a whole shift when we were talking about oh, there goes my blank mind again.
Well,
We were
it's
talking about
true though.
relationships in that. I was like, wait a second, I
Yes.
hadn't thought of it that way. So I think your book is can appeal to a wide audience. Like you said, it's not a
Yes.
cover to cover, so there's different segments that you can use. Now,
And you read things from different standpoints because the relationship and mind sections in particular, yes, this book is written with 20 and 30 somethings in mind, but if you read a chapter about the relationship section, for example, or the anxiety, depression, whatever it is, that you read 1 year and then a year later you have an entirely different situation scenario, you're going to read it from a different mindset. If you're in one relationship and you read it, you're going to read it in context to that relationship. If you get into a new relationship and you reread it, it's in context to your new relationship. It's you're evolving, but the sentiments are going to shift. We learn life lessons over and over again. And unfortunately, we have to learn the same lesson a couple of times before we get it, but it has to show up in different ways. So if you're showing up in different relationships with the same baggage, you got to work on those components. And unfortunately, we tend to work on them in relation to the current partner as opposed to in relation to ourselves. So if we keep rereading these chapters and we figure out the common denominator is us, we come at it from different scenarios, different lessons, different knowledge and growth that we keep evolving through. So yes, put it on a shelf, come back to it and reread, of course.
well, I'm pretty sure I have a few Christmas gifts figured out for this year because I know a few people that are going to be getting this book in their stocking, and I'm also going to ping some of my family members so they could get it for their kids too.
Yeah, good graduation gift, good gift for the welcome to college, but also just a
Welcome
great
to
gift.
life.
Just a great
Here's
gift
the
for
book.
anybody struggling, just anybody feeling like things are a little crunchy right now and I want them to be smooth. Like, I'm just having a hard time with X. There's 98 very quick chapters. Everybody has something that they can grow from within this book because everybody is struggling with something and they may not feel comfortable talking to another person about it. They may not feel comfortable Googling it. They may not even know what to Google, but this is a jumping off point. So you can begin to heal, you can begin to work through whatever you need. And it gives you the tools to then go ask your friends, ask questions, talk to people, and proceed with the life that you want.
Natasha, I know people are going to be looking for this book. So where can people connect with you and get their copy of Shit Adults Never Taught Us?
Absolutely. So you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. You can also get an e-copy for Apple Books or Google Play Books. There's also shitadultsnevertaughtus.com if you want a signed copy or like a cool little t-shirt, lots of merch that's funny on there. And if you follow the Instagram, it's at Shit Adults Never Taught Us. I love when people post photos of the book. I share them on my stories. Or if you're reading the book and you have a question that goes further than the bite-sized chapters, DM me. I answer everything. I will answer any questions you have.
Perfect. Well, Natasha, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story.
Thank you. This was amazing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like